Okay, we're going to work on dividing decimals. Now, dividing decimals is very similar to regular dividing whole numbers, but we do have to be careful of the decimal. So the first thing when we divide, we need to set up the division correctly. You want to make sure you understand the math vocabulary. We have the dividend divided by the divisor, which equals the quotient. If we're going to set this up to solve it, we need to put the dividend on the inside. Notice the dividend divided by the divisor, and when we get to the end of the problem, the quotient, the solution, will be at the top. Then we also need to pay attention to the decimal. If you have a decimal in the divisor, it must be moved right. Then the same movement must happen in the dividend. I'll show you this in the example problem. Then you do the division, and then finally you bring up the decimal straight into the divisor. Let's go ahead and get started on our example. Notice I have 252 divided by 56. The easiest way to remember is just to write it exactly how it sounds. I have 252 divided by 5.6. So I have set up my problem correctly. Notice my dividend, which was my first number, is inside the box. Now we're going to go to step 2. If I have a decimal in the divisor, I'm looking at the divisor, and yes, I do have a decimal. It must be moved right. Okay, so I need to move my decimal one spot. Then the same movement must happen in the dividend. So notice in my dividend, I have 252. I don't have a decimal. I do know that a decimal exists right here, and I am going to have to move it one spot. Now, since I have an empty space, I do need to fill it with a 0. And I'm going to extend my line. Now I can go ahead and solve my problem. I look at 56. How many times does it go into 2? It doesn't. Does it go into 25? Nope. 56 does go into 252. In fact, I think it goes in about 4 times. The reason I figured that out is 50 goes into 255 times, but 6 is kind of big, so it won't go in 5 times. So 4 times 6 is 24. 4 times 5 is 20, plus 2 is 22. Now I need to do my subtraction. So 4 can't come from 2. I need to regroup. 8. 4 minus 2 is 2. And nope. So now I'm going to bring down my 0. So this time, I think it is going to go in about 5 times, because notice that 5 times 50 is 250, and 5 times 6 is 30, which should be exactly 280. So I'm going to put a 5 up here. 5 times 6 is 30. 5 times 5 is 25, plus 3 is 28. And I'm at 0. So I'm done with my division. Now step 4 does tell me to bring the decimal straight up from the divisor. So my decimal is right here, so I'm going to bring it straight up. So my answer is 45. My quotient is 45. Okay, let's go ahead and look at example number 2. In example number 2, I also need to write it as a division problem. So notice that I'm going to go 14.464 divided by 3.2. Now that I have it set up, I'm going to look at my decimal. I do have a decimal in the divisor, so I do need to move it one spot to the right. And since I moved one spot to the right here, I need to move one spot to the right here. Okay. Now let's go ahead and do the division. Well, 32 can't go into 1, 32 can't go into 4, but 32 can go into 144. In fact, I'm going to try 4 times. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. Okay, I need to do some borrowing here. Regrouping, that's a 3. That becomes 14. 14 minus 8 is 6. 3 minus 2 is 1. And that's 0. Okay, now I bring down my 6. Okay, 32 and 166. Well, I know that 30 will go into 150 about 5 times. So I'm going to try 5. 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 is 16. I'm at 6. And now I'm going to bring down my 4. I notice that 32 goes into 64 2 times. So I'm going to write 2. 2 times 32 I know is 64. And now I'm at 0. So I finished the problem. Now step 4 is to bring the decimal straight up into the divisor. So I moved my decimal right here, so I'm going to bring it straight up. And my answer is 4.52. My quotient is 4.52. Now let's go on to the area problem. Yesterday we solved area problems with multiplication and we just used length times width, but this time we're going to have to go backwards. So notice that we do have a rectangle. So I do have my area equals length times width because I do have a rectangle. But this time I'm missing one of the side lengths. Notice that I'm missing the length. So I still am going to substitute my numbers in. My area, I've been given the area. Area is 56.5. I don't know my length, so I'm just going to leave that. And then my width is 2.5. Now this does end up being a division problem. I want to figure out what the length is. The length is being multiplied by 2.5. So in order to figure out what the length is, I need to divide. So I'm going to divide by 2.5 because we know that division undoes multiplication. And whatever I do to one side, I do need to do to the other. Okay. These cross cancel. And I'm left with a division problem. So let's rewrite this as division. Notice that I have 56.5 divided by 2.5. So I'm going to write it exactly like that. 56.5 divided by 2.5. Now when I take a look at my problem here, now that I have it set up, I do notice that I still have a decimal in the divisor. So I'm going to move that one spot to the right. And when I move that spot to the right, I need to move one more spot to the right. And there's my decimal spot. Now 25 does not go into 5, but it does go into 56. And 25 goes into 56, I think about 2 times, because 2 times 25 is 50. So I'm going to put a 2 right above the 6. 2 times 25 I know is 50. I'm going to bring down my 6. Now we bring down the 5. Now 25 is going to go into 65, still 2 times. 2 times 25 is 50. 65 minus 50 is 15. Now I'm not quite done yet. I'm going to have to add a 0 so I can bring it down. And 25 now into 150. Well, I know 25 goes into 104 times, and it goes into 52 times. So 25 goes into 150 6 times. I'm going to extend my line here. That 6 needs to go above that 0. And I know that equals 150, and I'm now at 0. So I've finished my division. It's time to move the decimal. Notice the decimal's here. I'm going to bring it straight up. So my quotient, my answer, my solution is 22.6. And that is division.